Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And this week we need to start with a correction.
Some serious matters of business to attend to.
Yeah, I incorrectly said on the first of our two Crown Season 4 recap episodes that Margaret Thatcher's poll tax may have contributed to her re-election due to people not registering to vote as a way of avoiding the tax. However, listener Brian emailed and pointed out that the tax came after her third election, so it couldn't obviously have affected the outcome there. I think I got confused, and the voter suppression angle on it was more like a criticism of it at the time rather than an actual effect. I think I got carried away wanting to criticise Thatcher, and who can blame me? But yeah, I'm very sorry, and thanks Brian for pointing it out. I am quite embarrassed, but it's good to get these things straight and be able to address them.
We do have a lot more to say about the Crown, and we will get on to all of that lighter stuff in a few minutes, but we would be remiss not to mention the big story of the week, which was Meghan Markle's very beautiful opinion piece that she wrote for the New York Times, in which she revealed that she had a miscarriage in July. I'm sure all of you have read it by now. I'm sure many of you, like us, were very upset by this piece and really felt for Meghan. I thought it was an excellent piece of writing. I loved how she structured it. I thought the opening was so visceral with her describing that moment. And, you know, your heart really breaks for her as you're reading the piece. But then in very Meghan style, she connects her own loss with the losses that we've all experienced this year. The piece is headlined "The Losses We Share," and she talks about the deaths during the pandemic and the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and what she describes as the loss of a shared belief in what is true, speaking specifically about science and the election results.
And she writes then specifically about the stigma around miscarriage. She says, "Losing a child means carrying an almost unbearable grief, experienced by many but talked about by few. In the pain of our loss, my husband and I discovered that in a room of 100 women, 10 to 20 of them will have suffered from miscarriage. Yet despite the staggering commonality of this pain, the conversation remains taboo, riddled with unwarranted shame, and perpetuating a cycle of solitary mourning." And I thought, like, that's a very powerful statement. Like, it's a powerful piece of writing all the way through, I thought. But especially, you know, this is something that people with such a big platform can do so effectively, which is to talk about something that nobody wants to talk about, and then suddenly it's part of a much bigger conversation. They break that open. And that's like a great service that Meghan can do for women all around the world.
And it does end on a hopeful note, because she has written this. It was obviously Thanksgiving in America, and she wrote it the day before Thanksgiving, encouraging people to ask their loved ones over the holiday, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, which is obviously a phrase that we can very much associate with Meghan since the Tom Bradby ITV documentary and all of the conversation that surrounded that since. But she asks herself in this piece, "Are we okay? We will be."
That's so Meghan, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. A great rhetorical flourish.
A friend of Harry and Meghan's reportedly told Katie Nicholl at Vanity Fair they decided that they wanted to talk about this and that this was the right time to do so. There's a tone of hopefulness and optimism at the end of the article, which I think shows where they are today. They are doing well. That's good to hear. And they had some stories in People magazine where they were talking about how they had a quiet Thanksgiving at home and that they're having lots of fun with Archie and they're looking forward to decorating for Christmas and the new home and all this kind of stuff. So, like, even though the piece itself was very raw, clearly the message coming from it at the end, as we said, is hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reaction to this was pretty mixed, as pretty much everything that Meghan Markle has done for the last 3 years has been. And actually, this came out 2 days before the 3rd anniversary of their engagement announcement. It's just wild, all the stuff that's happened in the space of 3 years. So on one hand, you had charities such as Tommy's and the UK Miscarriage Association commending Meghan for breaking the silence, as they put it. I also saw a really good piece in The Guardian, an opinion piece by Zainab Gurtin, who's a lecturer in women's health at UCL, who wrote, "Some women never speak of their miscarriages to family or friends because they fear making them uncomfortable. Others blame themselves for having failed at pregnancy and feel like something is wrong with them. This is why the personal accounts of women such as Michelle Obama, Chrissy Teigen and now Meghan matter so much. By speaking up about their loss and heartache, they help normal women feel less alone and give them a reference point for new conversations. The personal is not only political but deeply powerful as well."
Yeah, and I mean, that just makes so much sense with this piece.
Yeah, and I feel like it wasn't that long ago when Chrissy Teigen shared her experience and the photos, and there was huge conversation around that, which was similarly divided as we're seeing it now with Meghan. Obviously for Meghan, the difference is that she is a black woman, and as we know, there is so much of an increased risk during pregnancy and childbirth for black women, so it resonates in a different way when it's coming from Meghan.
Yeah, and it is really striking to see how the British media covered the story. Some of the female writers who have been most critical of Meghan praised her for her bravery, but then other royal reporters felt like she was invading her own privacy, and therefore that this revelation would backfire and hurt the privacy case that she has against the Mail on Sunday.
Yeah, and like some of our followers on Instagram had messaged us and asked us, like, how do you reconcile this New York Times piece with Meghan's stated desire for privacy? And like, this comes up whenever Meghan does anything. I think people are like, I thought she wanted privacy. Like, in my view, or I presume in our collective view, privacy doesn't mean like that you're never seen or heard from again.
Yeah.
I think privacy is about choice, like being able to choose what parts of your private life that you share, rather than having people flying drones over your back garden or hacking your mobile phone or rooting through your bin or whatever.
Yeah, it's not like an on-off switch where it's either all private or all open. That is like total madness, I think.
Also, and you know, as neither of us have any experience of pregnancy or parenthood, so it's really not our place to comment in detail about this, but it just strikes me that it's none of our place to tell anyone else how to grieve or how to process something like this or how to talk about baby loss.
And it's pretty horrible then to see people accusing Meghan of looking for positive publicity with this after like having months of negative coverage.
I mean, I do think, you know, Meghan is, as we say a lot, a media savvy person.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean she's an attention hungry person. That just means she knows the impact of her words and how to use her profile. And it seemed to me that this was an example of her using her profile to draw attention to a topic that lots of people find very hard to talk about, and that she knew that this kind of piece would open her up to criticism from all the usual parties, but she wasn't doing it for her own gain, in my view, but because she knew that it could possibly resonate with or help people who have experienced loss this year.
Absolutely. And I know this kind of thing sort of goes without saying, but if Kate had written this piece, this would not be divisive. There would not be the same criticism of it at all. Kate would probably be crowned queen immediately. People would be so over the moon about it. And it's very obvious why this is an issue for some people.
I know, because, you know, we should point out that Zara Tindall and Sophie Wessex, two of the lesser known royals, have also spoken out about their experiences of baby loss. So it's not like Meghan is the first royal ever to talk about this. And, you know, curiously, she's the only one who gets accused of oversharing, which it's just disgusting, honestly. But I thought I saw this tweet that summarised it quite neatly, and I think a lot of people said the same thing when Chrissy Teigen spoke out as well. A Twitter user called Paisley Thompson who tweeted, Meghan Markle won't see all of the nasty shit you write about her, but your friends who have experienced miscarriage and the loss of a baby will.
Yeah.
And that makes it all the more difficult for people who have experienced this to speak out, because they're seeing this implicit shaming going on in regards to Meghan.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
I was a little bit surprised, honestly, that we didn't hear any negative responses from the usual palace insiders. I did see that Harry and Meghan reportedly told the royal family about the miscarriage, though it was not known whether they had been told that Meghan was writing this piece for the New York Times. Not that they fucking had to be told, but just to point out. And it made me wonder a little bit, like, could this possibly be like a turning point in the relationship between the royals and the Sussexes? Or is this just like one rare instance where these like hard-hearted misery guts understand, like, actually no, we shouldn't badmouth her this time? I
mean, especially as like we're going to talk about everyone's reaction to the crown later, like maybe them saying something horrible about another woman in their family and their experiences of pregnancy would just be like too on the nose even for these people.
Yeah.
But it could be because they had a lot on their plate with a rather special announcement.
I think on Monday when I saw this Instagram post, I don't even know what we were doing, but I was like, oh my God, Tom.
The day we never thought would come.
It's finally arrived. The answers we've all been waiting for to those 5 big questions.
Yeah. I mean, Monday was the announcement of the 5 big insights.
What is 5 big questions for people who have forgotten this survey that happened so many, many, many moons ago?
So this was Kate's big project to do with early childhood development. So that's the years up until 5 years old. And back in March?
I think it was March.
Yeah. She released this survey, 5 big questions. It was exactly what it sounds like. 5 questions that anybody could answer.
We answered them,
yeah.
Many of you did, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think you could actually answer it as many times as you wanted as well. But anyway...
How many times did you do it?
How many of the 500,000 responses were mine? You'll never know. But yeah, she got...
Was that how many there were?
That's what they keep saying, yeah, because...
I just kept hearing this is the biggest survey ever of its kind. I don't know what that means. Like, could we say this is the biggest podcast of its kind?
Because it's the only one with us on it.
Because it's the only anti-monarchist podcast about the British royal family. Even if like 5 people listen to it, it's the biggest of its kind ever.
It is, and it is a milestone as well. That's also what we got. But yeah, so she announced the announcement of the insights on Monday, and then we got the actual insights themselves on Friday. And we did get messages from people during the week, listeners, saying that the timing was pretty unfortunate because obviously we had Meghan's New York Times piece coming out on Wednesday. But it does seem like this whole project has been so weird right from the start that there's really no like good way for all of this to unfold.
I mean, it took like 9 months or 9 years in the Palace Press Office words to get these answers to us, and they just happened to fall this week. It's such an unfortunate coincidence.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more to it than that.
Yeah, neither do I. So the Royal Foundation website reminds us that the publication of this research follows 9 years of work by the Duchess of Cambridge. And I think it's really important to bear that 9 years in mind when you listen to what these insights are.
Let's get to it, Tom. Give me the insights.
1. People overwhelmingly believe that a child's future is not predetermined at birth. However, most people don't understand the specific importance of the early years. When we saw this, because we saw it in a video, which we'll talk about later, but I thought the video had been clipped too early because I was like, where's the insight in this?
I watched that video 6 times waiting for the insight.
And it never came.
Before I realised she was just saying the same thing over and over again.
I feel like she's been saying that since she started working on Early Years.
Let me give you a big insight too.
Sure.
The reality of life makes it hard for parents to prioritise their well-being.
So parents are generally quite busy with their kids, I think, is the gist of this one.
Parents get a rough go of it.
Well, insight 3 is also incredibly obvious. Feeling judged by others can make a bad situation worse.
So true.
Preach, Kate.
Insight 4. People have been separated from family and friends during the pandemic, and at the same time, parental loneliness has dramatically increased. Disturbingly, people are also less willing to seek help for how they're feeling.
This is a little bit more interesting, this one.
Also interesting for the fact that it has to do with the pandemic, which, from what I can remember, the 5 big questions that I answered had no mention of the pandemic.
No, you'd be absolutely right there. They had no mention of it, and we'll talk as well in a bit about the other surveys that helped contribute to these insights.
But before you get into that, Tom, you've got to tell them big insight 5.
Oh yeah, sorry for keeping you all waiting. Number 5. During the COVID-19 pandemic, support from local communities has substantially increased for many, but not for all.
How exquisitely vague.
I know, like, no qualifying words here as to, like, what kind of support she's talking about. She's talking about economic, she's talking about emotional, like, what is going on here? These are probably the most banal statements I've ever heard.
I was truly stunned when these started to roll out. I couldn't fathom how they could, with a straight face, present this to us as one of the most crucial studies into early childhood development. I don't think I've ever actually said this word out loud. I think maybe it's just an internet word, but I just thought, like, this is a nothing burger of a study. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
When I was looking at it, I was like, I'm actually angry at how banal this is.
I think the only insight that really had anything to it was insight 4, which is one of 2 insights that talk about COVID. And like we said, that wasn't part of the 5 questions. It's kind of not surprising that the insights are so vague, given those questions were, like, absolutely...
Yeah, we talked about that at the time.
Yeah. But it turns out that they combined the findings of the 5 big questions with some other surveys. So royal reporter and biographer Ahmed Scobie wrote a piece for Harper's Bazaar in which he mentioned that in addition to the 5 big questions, information was also drawn from a nationally representative face-to-face survey of over 3,700 people, a survey on the impact of COVID-19, in-depth research on the importance of the early years, and ethnographic research with 12 families. And that just makes so much sense to me because, like, we were even saying at the time with the 5 big questions that there was, like, no question that had anything to do with, like, what demographic the participant was from. Like, I don't really know very much about surveys, but, like, I feel like you need to know, like, where your data is coming from.
Yeah, and I just think it's such a farce that 2 of your 5 big insights are based on a completely different survey than the 5 big questions survey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, very telling here that at least one of these other surveys that they talk about had, like, a much smaller kind of pool of people, but clearly the questions were a lot better. It was a lot more targeted. It was prioritizing getting usable data over what I think with the 5 big questions is they just wanted as many people as possible to fill out, like, a bullshit online form so that they could say that Kate had done this thing which had, like, affected 500,000 people.
So they could sell off your data.
Yeah, probably. Absolutely.
What are they going to do with all those with all that data now?
My views on early years development are priceless.
I did find that Harper's Bazaar piece very funny.
Yeah.
There were a couple of lines in it that seriously raised my eyebrows. Like, there was one about Kate, like, keeping all her important documents in a binder. That was very funny. And also the line, the announcement of these insights followed 9 years of work by Kate, which has included dozens of engagements across the UK.
So funny.
Dozens.
Dozens over 9 years.
That means, I mean, I'm just assuming here. My assumption from this is that he has calculated how many engagements she has done and cannot say hundreds.
Yeah.
I did find it notable that the coverage of this was kind of slight, I felt.
Yeah.
Like, it was only on one front page the day it came out. Then it got more front page coverage on the weekend. But a lot of the media coverage over here that I saw was really focused on the COVID related findings. Like, the Guardian piece mentioned the insight on lockdown loneliness and cited the figure that 38% of parents experienced loneliness before the crisis and 63% after the first lockdown. And that obviously is the research from the other survey, not the 5 Big Questions survey, which just to me really shows up how useless that first survey seems to be. And I mean, obviously we should mention here that we're not experts in this field at all, but what's frustrating to me is the coverage around this, the push from the Palace press office about how important and significant all of this research is. And then when you look at what the research is actually saying, it's just empty.
Yeah. And it is like a classic Cambridge thing of making a big announcement.
Fur coat and no knickers, is that what you mean, Tom?
Yeah, pretty much, because this is just meant to be giving an idea for the direction of Kate's possible future work.
This is a woman who is, like 6 months away from being 10 years a royal.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting for her to get some direction. It's infantilizing the way they talk about it.
I do wonder how long she's going to be able to work in this area without talking about politics. Like, she does mention, and she mentioned in the speech she gave on Friday, about how early years development can have a huge effect on things like addiction, mental health issues, and homelessness in adults. And I just feel like there's a lot of stuff there that Tories, or a certain kind of Tory, would like to blame on these like bullshit reasons like bad character or laziness or like a lack of stiff upper lip. All these things that traditionally governments have not wanted to take responsibility for. So if Kate is going to come out all guns blazing saying like, no, these problems are because of like systemic failures in our governance, then, you know...
Kate's never going to say that, Tom.
No, she's not, is she? I'm getting my hopes up.
I do want to talk about the social media strategy around the 5 big insights. As a reminder to people, the Cambridges hired the Sussex's former digital comms lead, David Watkins, and he is the one who is often credited with overhauling the Kensington Royal social accounts, including that hugely successful Instagram versus reality post of Prince Louis and the viral video of the Cambridge kids grilling David Attenborough about spiders and stuff.
Yeah.
I like spiders. Do you like spiders too?
I think that kind of very lively, personal, but like also impersonal, very polished approach was really honed on Sussex Royal Instagram account. And at times I think it struck us that the Cambridges seemed to have lifted it wholesale for their own account.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Although I do feel like the Sussex's stuff was like never as ridiculous as what was rolled out this week, which was just so funny.
So on Monday, we got the video, the announcement of the 5 big insights. Classic Cambridge move.
Yeah.
Then throughout the week, we started getting these bizarre videos for each insight. And like Tom mentioned earlier, there was the first one that was like 12 seconds long and that you were just like, wait, that's the whole clip. Where's the insight?
98% of you said that nurture is essential to lifelong outcomes. But just 1 in 4 actually recognise the specific importance of the first 5 years of a child's life.
And then, you know, as you got used to it, they started adding in these strange elements. Like the second insight video had Kate sticking a A4 piece of paper with Insight 2 printed on it on a brick wall.
It was the outside of a house. Like, why would she be pinning that up on the outside of a house?
With this huge smile on her face. It was such a strange video.
Big time.
Like, delighted to be sticking this piece of paper on a wall. In the UK, where it rains all the time, this paper is going to last like 10 minutes. My favourite, though, was the carousel of images of Kate in the white lab coat style blazer.
So funny.
Doing important work all on the same day. All this carousel of all her work that she was doing on this research in the same outfit. They had ones of her writing notes, presumably to put in her binder. The best one to me was the third picture in the carousel where she was sitting at a table staring up at a PowerPoint presentation with a pie chart on it.
Yeah, like a really big pie chart. Like if you search like a stock image website for like science meeting, then like you would get that image.
It was amazing.
So funny.
And I realised, like, maybe we sound like we're being very hard on Kate here. We have talked to some of our followers who thought this rollout had been very effective and thought it made Kate look really good. It did strike me that in some of the royal watching groups I'm in on Facebook and stuff, there was radio silence about this project, apart from people saying, I love her hair.
Yeah, yeah.
And
which was possibly like the most spaniel-y it's ever looked.
I think part of this chimes into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was the other post they did, that weird feed post on Instagram where they had like an Instagram sticker to get people to ask questions, but instead of submitting the questions on Instagram stories, you'd have to leave them in a comment.
Yeah, but it did mean that we could scroll through all the comments and look at them, which was very funny.
Yeah, and then they had her answer these in a Q&A video, a 4-minute long IGTV video. And the types of questions, because we had scrolled through all the questions like you were saying, and the ones that kept coming up were so personal.
Yeah. Like,
it really made it clear to me that people's interest in Kate, or what they want from Kate, what they see Kate as, is like a royal mummy blogger or like a parenting influencer, rather than like a legitimate expert in the field, the early years field.
She's expert mummy.
Exactly, because almost all of the questions with the most likes on them on this Instagram post were about Kate's personal experience raising George and Charlotte and Louis, or else about her own childhood or her personal advice for parents. It wasn't like, what does the data say about this? And what does the research tell us about this? It was all, well, Kate, what do you do if in the heat of the moment you say something to your children that's very angry and then you regret it? How do you make up for that later? Or like, like I think your favourite one was like, how do you deal with sibling rivalry? Does it ever go away?
This absolute joker. Like, I really hope this wasn't like a serious question, because I just found it so funny. But Kate did not answer that question on her Instagram TV video. But she answered a lot of the kind of ones like, what is early years? Help! That was one of the questions. And she was kind of rattling off the answers, and she did as well have actual experts as well that it would cut to for some of the questions. I really liked her reference to wonderful emojis.
With loads of wonderful emojis attached to them.
Oh my god, that was so good.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh my god, what does she think is a wonderful emoji? And it is, I believe, what's officially called the loudly crying face.
Right, yeah.
The emoji with the tears streaming down the face.
It is a wonderful emoji. She is right there.
It's my most used emoji, I think. But I thought she did a good balance of answering the kind of neutral questions and then the more personal questions. Like, one of the ones she answered was, how do you deal with toddler tantrums? And I liked that one. Like, her reaction, she seemed like sort of like, I don't know, it was like cabin fever or like hyper or something.
Yeah.
She had this like delirious sort of giggle, and she was like, well, I'd like some advice from the expert on that too. And then cut to an expert giving advice on that. So it did do a good job, I think, of having those personal moments that people want while also not really giving anything away.
Yeah.
I'd also like to ask the experts myself.
But yeah, I think our main like takeaway from this week is that it is another Cambridge brouhaha, a lot of noise that really means nothing.
I feel like nobody's talking about it, to be honest, but then again, I am not in any mummy circles, parenting circles, child development, academic circles. Maybe it is really landing with other communities, but I am disappointed with this, and I feel like the communications around it has taken me for a fool.
Yeah, I agree. But the other big story from the week has been the royal reaction to season 4 of The Crown.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this has kind of been the unfolding over the last 2 weeks, but the story that caught my eye this week was that Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles have had to turn off the replies to their tweets because they were getting so badly trolled by fans of The Crown. Like, from what I could see, and you can see it on their Instagram as well, it's mostly just like a very long stream of comments saying Diana with a heart emoji.
Yeah.
But obviously it's gotten to them so much that now they're shutting down replies.
The very day that season 4 of The Crown came out, the Mail and Sunday Splash was all about how furious the palace was about it.
Yeah, they had these wacky comments from a royal insider, one of which was, "This is drama and entertainment for commercial ends being made with no regard to the actual people involved who are having their lives hijacked and exploited. In this case, it's dragging up things that happened during very difficult times 25 or 30 years ago without a thought for anyone's feelings. That isn't right or fair, particularly when so many of the things being depicted don't represent the truth." They, curiously though, could not give any examples of what things being depicted were untrue.
And that's something we've seen Harry and Meghan get berated for constantly whenever they talk about unfair coverage. People wanting them to like give examples and
A laundry list of
everything
that's not true.
But the palace source goes on specifically about Charles and Camilla. The new series paints the Prince and Duchess in a very unflattering light, but at least at the start of reality shows like The Only Way is Essex, they admit that some scenes have been invented for entertainment. There is no sense of telling carefully nuanced stories. It's all very two-dimensional. This is trolling with a Hollywood budget. The public shouldn't be fooled into thinking this is an accurate portrayal of what really happened.
I find the term trolling ludicrous. Like, that's the best you can do. That's your most cutting insult you can think of.
Absolutely. Like, so stupid, this whole thing. And it's like, it just sounds so bitter the way they're like, it's all very two-dimensional. It's not even a good show. It's a bad show. It's a very two-dimensional show.
They did bring it back to Harry and Meghan, this source, who said, "There are raised eyebrows about Harry taking millions from the company that's behind all this. After all, where do much of Netflix's profits come from? The Crown." Sassy source.
I'd really like to know what their proof is for that as well.
I saw Vanity Fair had a piece by Katie Nichol who said that Harry won't be watching this season of The Crown and that Will has no desire to watch it either. The narrative that Harry and Meghan have some kind of story approval on The Crown because they have a deal where they haven't even made anything yet is so ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But what I did like in this Vanity Fair piece was that Camilla will, according to one of her friends, be watching. The friend said, "I imagine she'll be tuning in with a glass of red wine to watch it. She has seen the previous series. She has a wonderful sense of humour and this won't fuss her in the slightest."
That is exactly how I imagine her watching The Crown as well, with like a whopper glass of red wine.
I wonder what she would think of it. I would love to hear her take on it. Like, does she think she's been hard done by? Does she think she's gotten a pretty good go of it?
Yeah. Does she just like the drama of it, or does she see it for what it kind of is? But over the past couple of weeks, we've had like royal reporters lining up to defend the royals, attacking the Crown for rewriting history, calling its portrayal of events a disgrace.
Yeah, the language was so extreme in these pieces. It was so funny. It really seemed to me, though, that the show ultimately has nailed the broad strokes of all this.
Yeah.
And that is the most alarming thing for the royals, that, like, as we said in our recap episodes, the creator and writer of The Crown, Peter Morgan, can often be, to us, frustratingly sympathetic to the royals in the interest of fairness or balance or whatever. Like, he could have gone so much harder on them than he does. Like, even when we see them do something abhorrent, he'll linger on them to consider their motives or, you know, possible regret for what they've done, or
how they've been forced into that situation. It's not
Yeah.
their fault.
But, like, the fact of all this alleged fiction is that the royal family's behaviour around Diana in particular was irredeemable and was horrific, and the royals know that, and they just don't want people to be reminded of it and to talk about it. It made me think, like, what is the effect of all this going to be, like, down the line? Because obviously, you know, if you have a few weeks of people commenting Diana on Clarence House posts or whatever, like, that's one thing, but that'll stop eventually. Or, like, is it possible that this could have further reaching consequences for how people view the royals?
I'm not sure, because I do think, like, the big takeaway, the big kind of provocation for people was seeing the conflict between Charles and Diana being played out. And it's something that most people in the UK already knew about. Obviously, it hits home in a different way when you see it on screen, and especially, I suppose, for younger viewers who weren't aware of it in the same way, although they may well know the story.
But, like, is this all going to come back on Charles and Camilla? Like, did they bear the brunt of the blame or the anger in this? Like, is it just considered this isolated personal incident that happened between those three people? Or is it a symptom of the failures of the monarchy as an institution? And are people going to start questioning, do we need a monarchy? Could this be the beginning of the wave to overthrow the monarchy?
I would absolutely love that. I really wish I could believe that. But I feel like, you know, the people who have been whipped up by the show are probably taking a similar approach to what I see as Peter Morgan's kind of framing of it, which is that Charles's behaviour, which is abhorrent, is in a large part down to his treatment by the Queen, and therefore her, like, personal failures as a mother. Maybe because she is prioritising duty in the monarchy and things. But I do think that the criticism of Charles and Camilla, it's kind of robbed of any long-lasting weight that it might have, because it's ultimately criticism of royal individuals with very little actual anti-monarchist sentiment. It's like against the individuals and not the institution.
Yeah, and, you know, we do see discussion of some people saying this reminds them of the treatment of Harry and Meghan. And in that case, it could possibly have more of a long-term impact on people. But certainly the narrative that we're hearing now is, God, they were awful to Diana.
Yeah. And again, you know, that was still in the past, so...
And getting a lot of the stories about, like, the Diana and the Meghan experiences were not the same. Meghan had someone to leave with. Meghan was older, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. So people are really seeing it as this isolated incident. Even though the Diana thing is just one problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrible what they did to Diana. But it's also even more horrible that a monarchy exists at all in this day and age.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter what they look like or how bratty they are.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, it's very notable that everyone cares when it's the blonde white lady, but it's suddenly divisive and, like, much more open to debate and things when it's a person of colour. I do think it's really good if it's got the royals scared, though, even if I don't believe it's going to have any particular long-lasting effect.
Scared of a little TV show.
A little two-dimensional TV show.
I've got a really great quote of the week.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
That I've been dying to talk about. This is from Kate's speech that she gave launching her 5 Big Insights report, where she said, rather audaciously, "The early years are not simply about how we raise our children. They are, in fact, about how we raise the next generation of adults." This, perhaps the most sensational finding from 9 years of work in the early years sector. Children grow up to become adults.
It's so funny. It's the in fact that really does it for me, as though like this was something that nobody had thought of before.
We're not just raising children. We're raising children that will one day become adults. It is so meaningless.
Yeah.
All of this just reminds me so much of Armando Iannucci.
Yeah.
Like the thick of it, Veep. Like it's just making me long for Armando Iannucci's The Crown.
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be incredible.
Like just imagining how they would put this survey together and someone being like, what if we get you to stick that piece of paper on that wall? Would that look good on Instagram? Like, or like people being like, okay, I think we can only really get 3 insights out of this. What's that other survey they did with the coronavirus thing? Like it's just it just feels so cobbled together.
Yeah, that like last minute scene of like, we've only got 4, and then someone being like, just say parents are stressed. Say they're stressed.
Just say the children will grow up to be adults. It also reminds me of that episode of Succession when Tom and Greg are trying to come up with the slogan and they come up with, "We here for you."
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's good because it's like, it's not clear exactly what the hell it means. So, lots of wiggle room.
Yes.
We can say some nice things about Kate's clothes.
Yeah, she can be fit for a queen this week.
We got a lot of familiar pieces on the 5 big insights rollout. The white lab coat blazer that Tom was so wild about is a Zara blazer.
Yeah.
That she's had for like 5 years. There was the pink M&S suit that we were such fans of back at the start of the pandemic. She wore this blue double-breasted Reese dress that Carol Middleton had once worn to Ascot like 10 years ago, and Kate has worn a few times since then. That silk polka-dotted equipment blouse when she was writing in the 3rd insight clip. My favourite, though, was this new, or previously unseen by us, wax jacket from Barber's collection with Alexa Chung in the Insight 4 video. She wore it over a cream jumper, and I love the oversized fit. I love the gingham lining. I thought it looked really cool and modern and just so much fresher than all those like neat little belted wax jackets that we see her wear a lot. Though, like, honestly, how many wax jackets does one woman need? But you were a big fan of the hair in this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said before, it was incredibly spaniel-y. I think that combined with, you know, she was quite, I guess, animated in how she was talking. And it just looked like she was very excited to be outside. She was going on her walk. She was wearing her outdoor jacket. She reminded me of a cute spaniel.
Oh, we should say R.I.P. Lupo.
Oh, yeah.
Such terribly sad news.
That was really, really sad. He was a beautiful dog.
First in line this week.
It's got to be Meghan.
I agree.
Her piece was, like we said, so powerful, and I really do think that that kind of piece with that kind of platform has the power to help a lot of people.
Even on just a basic level, in showing people like that they're not alone, and even though people don't feel comfortable talking about it, that they can go and read a piece by this very high profile woman in the American newspaper of record.
Yeah.
In The Guardian, the psychotherapist Jodie Day was quoted as saying, "This is precisely how taboos are broken, when people choose to speak out despite knowing they will be criticised, attacked and shamed for doing it."
Brave, I think it was.
And brilliant. So thank you, Meghan. Next week.
We might get more insights on the insights.
Yeah, I mean, they did a 52-page report, so who knows how many more insights they can milk out of that. I was thinking we might get some more details on Royal Christmas.
Yeah.
Because according to the new restrictions that Boris Johnson announced this week, your 3 households are allowed to mix for Christmas week, and the Queen obviously then we'll be mixing with 2 other households. According to the Daily Mail, one of them is the Wessexes, Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex. So who is going to get that much coveted slot? The final slot? Will it be Charles and Camilla? Will it be the Cambridges? I think it'll probably be Andrew.
Yeah, I think it'll be Andrew as well. God.
We had said we were going to talk about the Martin Bashir panorama thing this week, but then...
Nobody wanted us to.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens this week.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening.
And until next time, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. A huge number here with loads of wonderful emojis attached to them.